Hello again, and welcome to this very special kickoff webinar today, where we'll be launching two awesome Excello product upgrades, one being rich text activities and the other event-based triggers. My name is Tara, and I'm joined by the CEO, Jeff McQueen, who'll host majority of this webinar and walk you through everything you need to know about our latest and greatest product features. But before I hand things off to Jeff, I'll just let you know that if you have any questions throughout this webinar, just throw them in the Q&A section of Zoom that you'll see down there at the bottom of your screen, and we'll either get to them on the fly or at the very end of the webinar. All right, over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for coming along today for what promises to be a pretty crazy big launch day here at Excello. We're only 17 days into 2018, and we've actually got a couple of really big special things happening for you in your Excello accounts to kick off the new year. As Tara mentioned, these two big upgrades are for our rich text activities as well as for our event-based triggers, which a lot of you will probably quickly start calling email triggers, but we actually have a bit more up our sleeve than just making it based on emails being captured. In terms of our agenda for today, because we've got two big upgrades, we're going to sort of run the conversation and demo in parallel for those. Sorry, one after the other, not in parallel. That would be hard to speak in parallel. So the idea is that we'll cover the rich text activities first, and then we'll get into the event-based triggers. All right, so first of all, the rich text activities. Now, before we dive into the specifics of this, it's worth just recapping briefly what activities are, because it could be a few users of Excello who aren't actively using them or maybe don't even know that they're using them today. So in Excello, as an activity is a way for you as a user to be able to do a lot of different things that are all kind of tightly correlated. So that the ability for you to make a note on a client record or a sale or a project or a task or anywhere else you're doing work. They're the ability for you to log your time. So if you go into your daily timesheet or weekly timesheet screen and log an hour, you're actually creating an activity as well. They're a way for you to send an email to a client or your colleagues. And they're also a way for you to do things like schedule meetings, which can then synchronize into your calendar so that the invitations go out and they synchronize in both directions. So that's what an activity is. And by having all of your activity bundled together in that unified view, it means that the things that we often have to do but don't like to do, like keep track of our time or look back on the history of what we've done, is all tightly coupled together. So the act of sending an email, even if it wasn't sent via Excello, but you just sent it from your regular email account and it got captured in Excello, that then seeds and becomes the basis of your timesheet, for example. So that's the idea behind activities. They're really powerful, they're all purpose, and they're connected to almost everything in the platform. Now, the idea of having all these activities together and the ability to do these various things in one place means you can then actually start to draw interesting information, such as looking at a stream of activities and see the history of what you've been working on or what your colleagues have been saying. So it means that you don't just have that easy ability to do everything from logging time to sending emails to making notes. You then have a single place to be able to see the history of what's been going on. And those activities don't just appear in the stream. You can also output them as part of timesheet reports, and they can also be added either just as subjects or full body, if you wish, to invoices as well. So when it comes time to do your billing to clients, you can provide them with a lot of evidence of the work you've been doing, because as professionals, most of us have had the challenge of doing work that our customers don't understand. Otherwise, they'd probably do it themselves. And where we're doing the work without them necessarily watching us working away. And so the ability to provide a beautiful invoice with a lot of extra detail helps to make sure things get paid on time. So what some of you might be thinking, yep, I know all of this, and I'm really here for the rich text activities. But before we jump into that, why the hell did you guys actually do plain text to start with? And the reason really is because we wanted to make it easy for folks to be able to put in content and then display that content in various places, some of which are not going to be rich text friendly, such as the example of, part of an invoice, for example, having a whole bunch of, extra detail there could actually be quite frustrating. If you're pulling reports out into CSV or spreadsheet format, you're not going to get rich text. So we wanted to start with the basic side of things. And we actually thought, because of Excello's automatic email tracking, that a lot of the folks who wanted to do rich text activities would send them out of their email program, and Excello would get a copy of them, and everyone would live happily ever after. But what we found from our users is that you really wanted rich text activities. And I've actually just got the window, I only loaded up just before the start of the call. So this is in User Voice, our ideas forum. So if you go to ideas.excello.com, you're able to suggest ideas and vote on ideas. And you can see here that this idea, the rich text editor, HTML formatting for activity creation, it's actually the #1 with 285 votes across our customer list. And as you can see from back down here in March of 2012, it's been something people have wanted for a really long time. Now, the reason we didn't get to it earlier is, frankly, we had some higher priorities that we needed to knock over first. We also wanted to make sure that when we did it in a way that was really easy to use and powerful, and didn't end up making everyone who just needed to log some time or put in some notes feel like they were, back in a 1990s word processor. So that was another factor that made life a little bit more complicated. So what we've done, and we actually launched this in a preview just before Christmas. So some of you have probably been playing with this for the last, month or so. But today we're launching it for all of our users. So now it won't be something that requires a special domain name or any active effort. Just using your normal Excello account will unlock all of this power from today. So this, the idea of bringing the rich text in is not just to satisfy some of the personal desires we might have for bold or colors. It's actually about boosting the professionalism. So when you are sending an email to a client, being able to be formatting it intelligently and professionally with bullets and including images if necessary, and hyperlinks without having to spell out the entire URL. All of those sorts of things are what you'll be able to do with this new rich text activity. Now, what we're going to do now is jump into a demo, and the demo itself is going to be in 2 parts. We're going to talk about creating rich text activities, and then we're going to talk about how you're able to view or interact with them. And as we go in and play with it here, we'll see that there's the ability for you to create these rich text activities through a menu, an inline or contact setting, as well as keyboard shortcuts. So as we're going through this, just keep those things in mind. You're like, oh, okay, cool, I can sometimes use the menu, sometimes right click, and sometimes I can just use the keyboard shortcuts to speed things up. So let's go in together and look at an example. I'll just see if I've got an example here. Yeah, let's do an example ticket. So let's say I'm coming into this ticket here and I want to send the client an email with a bunch of rich text. So I come through here and I say, okay, I'm going to send this to Tara. Hi, Tara. Thanks for your question about this ticket. And maybe I want to make question italicized. So I can just hit Command or Control I, and that becomes italicized. If I want the word ticket to be bold, again, I can just use Control or Command B. So there's standard things that any of us who've been, using word processors for years will know, all work straight out of the box. In addition to the keyboard shortcuts, a lot of folks are going to find that this formatting button here is really the key to getting into this rich text experience. And as I mentioned before, we really wanted to make sure that the rich text experience did not overwhelm and it did not crowd out what should otherwise be as low friction process as possible for you and your users. So all of this really, for most people, is just going to be a case of having a single button here appear today in the product. And that's going to be the only real indicator or sign that something's happened. So with the formatting area, you're able to do a few things. You're able to change the size of the text. So you've got your paragraph, heading 1, heading 2, etc. You've got obviously bold, italic, underline. You can also change the text color. You can insert individual hyperlinks, and that's actually really powerful. So when you insert a hyperlink, you can paste in the URL. It's just a bit of sort of preview type stuff, but you can paste in a bunch of URL information there. You can even give it a title for a hover state and the text to display. Normally this works. Let me do an example. Click here to see our website. So I can select that area, and then generally you want to click on the hyperlink button there, because then you get the text preloaded, and I can put it in and say, yeah, I want to have excello.com as the link that I send to Tara. So that then goes in and you can see it's now a hyperlink, and I've got the image down here to be able to recognize that. Now, as a user, I actually spend a whole lot more time with a keyboard shortcut called Command or Control K, the letter K. I guess L was taken for left justification, so they took the last letter of link and made that the keyboard shortcut instead. So Control K is a great way to get into that hyperlink feature as well. As sort of mentioned with the lefts, you got left and right and justified. Remember when you're doing this, that this stuff's going to be represented in somebody's email client and how things look in an email client. So while you do have a reasonably high degree of control and flexibility, don't get too work of art about it just because they might be looking at it on a really small phone screen, or they might be looking at it, in an older version of Outlook or something like that. So, be professional, be proud, be able to do lots of formatting, but don't necessarily think of this as a replacement for Photoshop. We love the lists. So this is list number 2, and so you can copy them. You can set those with the bullets, whether they've got numbers or just bullets there, and you can even have some quoted text. So I can say this is what you said before, typos and all. And so I can select that area and quote that, for example. So it's always pretty handy to be able to do that sometimes. So this is how you're able to use the RTE using the formatting bar and keyboard shortcuts, as I kind of peppered through the conversation there. You're also able to go through and select things on a right-click basis. So you can select some words here, and then you can right-click, and then you get access to link. You also get access to image. And the reason we show image in the right-click as opposed to down the bottom is it does really matter where your cursor is when you insert an image. You can also, if you're a hacker, get into source code land, so you can see, okay, this is the HTML that's powering this email. As you can see, it's not full of lots of style tags and other noise. And you can also get in and actually insert tables from the right-click area. And that's in the right-click area for the same reason images are. It's very important to know where your cursor is. So I could insert a table here, for example, and my table could be, sort of a plan for the next few weeks. So it could be week 1, let's say week 2, and of course week 3. And I could just have the blue team and the gold team, and something else, nothing here, waiting, working, whatever makes sense for you. And of course then you get to select lots of them and make things bold, and make the columns italic potentially, even give them some colors. So let's make the blue team actually blue. So I come in here. Oh, actually I've gone and tricked myself into a painful place, but that's neither here nor there. So okay, I'm going to make the blue team blue, and the gold team, gold always looks bad on a screen, so it's just going to be some kind of crappy version of orange. All right, so that's now what you can do when you're creating activities. And in this example, I can send this activity and we'll see that it gets delivered. And we do absolutely everything we can to make sure you have full fidelity when that email shows up in somebody's inbox. So I come across the inbox land here, look at the ticket, and we can see, yep, we've got our table for width, we've got bold across the top, we've got colors here, quoted text, hyperlink that goes out to the Excello website, and so on and so forth. The network's being slow. So yeah, that's how this module works. It's really quite powerful. Now, you might have seen me click on the show images below. The example I just showed actually didn't have any images in it. So I want to take a minute to do an example with images. So here is an image. There are a number of ways to get images into the rich text editing area. So one of the ways is to right click and go into the image dialog here. And that allows you to find an image based on uploading from your hard drive, for example. You're also able to come in and, so yeah, you're able to basically upload files, or you can include a hyperlink here. So I just clicked on the file upload, but you could just put, if the image was on Jiffy or Imager or one of those, you can include where that image is. Google.com and so forth. It'll pull that image straight in. Now, it'll be great that some people will use this dialog, but honestly, I'm I'm probably like a lot of you in the sense of that seems like a lot of work. I'd rather just copy and paste. So what I can do as a user is I can grab an image that I've got and I can copy it. And now it's just on my clipboard, and now I can paste it. Oh, I did that wrong. I can copy the image, I did it this way, and I can drag and drop it across into the actual editing window. And then I can change the size of it. You know, I can basically all those sorts of things with the image that's actually there. And when I send this image, a couple of cool things happen. The first thing is the image and the email will go out to Tara. In this case, I'm going to get a copy of it in my demo account. So I come back across here and I can see here's my example with an image. So there's my image looking very cute. And that actually is attached and part of the email. It's done in a way that's inline, so there's no attachment icon on the right-hand side in Gmail or other email clients. But that image is actually embedded inside of the email. So there's no need for a user when they open it to be able to log into a network connection to access Excello's backend or anything like that. Now, the way that we do it is when you copy and paste those images across, we actually upload the image into the attachments area for this particular object. And so when I come in here, I can see that I've got my attachments for January of 2018, and there's my puppy. I just uploaded that. And I didn't have to upload that first. I just copied and pasted it into the editing window, and that just went straight out the door, which is pretty awesome, pretty powerful. Now, as you're dragging and dropping an image in, you might actually find yourself in the situation where you really don't want the image to be embedded. You might want it to just be attached. And so the way this works is that what you can't see is my mouse at the moment. I'm dragging and dropping something from my desktop. And if I drop it into the top section, it will embed. If I drop it into the bottom section, it will attach. And if I do that, then it will actually come in as an attachment, which is kind of important if you've got large files or things that you don't want to blow out the body content of your email. You just want them as a good old-fashioned traditional attachment. So that's the main things about how you're able to use rich text editing in areas like creating activities. But in addition to that, we've also applied rich text activities to the log time area. So you'll see now when you go into log time, you've got your formatting bar, and you can go and copy and paste an image in there if you wish. So that makes it easy. You know, sometimes a picture speaks 1,000 words. It's like, I did all of this stuff, and you can just embed the image of this is what you did. So that can be pretty cool. What you can also do is you can go to your timesheet screen. So I go to my daily timesheet now, and I can go through and log time from here. And again, I get the ability to use the formatting bar and upload, you know, sort of upload images and have bold and italics. Same thing applies for weekly timesheets. It's all quite powerful in that respect. Another thing that we've done with this upgrade is we've improved the way that we handle meetings and meeting reports. So unlike an activity where when you send the email, it's pretty clear that, you know, you've done your work and it's just done once and that's all well and good. When it comes time to have a meeting, you're actually scheduling the meeting's going to happen at some point in the future, but you don't know for sure whether it's actually going to be from 9 till 10. Maybe the meeting will run long and it's an hour and a half. And so the act of putting in your hours and logging your time needs to happen after the meeting's been completed. We call that a meeting report. It's how you're able to go through and report on the time. If you're putting in a meeting retrospectively, you can actually fill the report in right here in line, but that's not quite as common. So let's use the normal example where we've got a future meeting coming up. And so I can come through and say, this is a meeting. I hope there are puppies. So everyone loves puppies. They're very cute. And so I can come across here and drag in. Oops, I did that wrong. Apologies, guys. I have to do that again. I dragged it in and didn't hit my drop zone. The browser issue. All right, so come in here, create a meeting. Starting again, sorry about that. Test meeting, hope there are puppies. And we'll try this one more time here. And there it is, drops in. And so now I've created this meeting. Not only is it going in now and pushing this across to my calendar and synchronizing that, but what it's also doing is making it possible for me as a user to then come into my daily timesheet and enter a report. And when I come in and report on time now, I hit report or log time. And before, what used to happen is we'd send you off to this, frankly, kind of horrible screen where you'd lose your place, then you'd have to come back in again. But now what we have is the ability for you to create reports in line with this pop-up window. So we can see the description of what the meeting was in the top area here, but really the focus of this screen is about reporting on what happened at the meeting. So we had a good meeting. It went a bit long. So I can say that's actually 90 minutes, and that'll turn it into an hour and a half. Now, some of you may have been turned off using the meetings feature in the past because the meeting reporting experience, which is how you log your time, used to pepper your colleagues with the meeting reports and send them emails a lot, which can be a bit irritating. So now we've actually given you the option to say, no, I don't want to notify my attendees. Just log my time, thank you. And of course, this time log itself, as you can see, the formatting guide down here means that that stuff can be done as rich text as well. So quite powerful in terms of its functionality and what you can do there with this new improvement. All right, I'll just double check that there's nothing else that we wanted to cover there. Actually, the last thing I do want to cover is the ability for you to copy and paste from Word documents and other rich sources. And so what we do is we basically try and get the right balance between the fidelity of what your copy and paste was and the ability to maintain consistency as you do things like send emails or make notes. So a lot of web pages can come in with a lot of artifacts and noise and other rubbish. So we really try and maintain fidelity, but we don't get it to a point where it ends up being a real dog's breakfast and you end up looking at really horrible stuff. So what I'll do here is do an example of copy and paste. One of the article of the day in Wikipedia is Michelle Obama. So I'm just going to copy this section here of content, and then I come across and I paste it in, and I've just hit paste. And so all of this is now brought in, and it's pretty well maintained. Like we've got our footnotes and links and those sorts of things, but the formatting is a little bit tighter in this case because we're matching the formatting of what the emails will look like when they go out through Excello, as opposed to being, as I said, a complete free-for-all. And when I come in here, if I'm like, you know what, I really want this image to be bigger, thank you, I can drag it and drop that, give myself some extra paragraph spacing if I really want to. You can, when you copy and paste, you still have all of the edit power that you used to have. You're not stuck with just the way things used to be. And so, yeah, now you're able to create those activities. Now, as mentioned, after talking about the creation process, there's also the aspect of viewing them. And so I want to talk for a couple of minutes about that. So in Excello, we've got this ability to see in your stream a quick snapshot of what's going on. And if we made every single activity with all this richness, if we made those screens be fully loaded all of the time, it would drive you crazy. You basically would just have too much noise and too much screaming at you. So we have this collapsed view here around activities. And what allows you to do is then go in and click on them to expand. And it's when you expand, when you view them in expanded mode, that's when you get to see all of the fidelity and all of the detail. And so the collapsed view just says, here's an image, and then we have the image and block text there to let you know there's something. When you click into it, then you actually see what the image is. In addition, you can reply in line, and when you do that, you're able to then not only reply in line, but also still use all of your rich text experiences. So all of the things that we've been talking about, you're able to go through and drag and drop stuff in and make other changes just with the same information, the same way. Now, the other places that you can see activity content are places like Invoices, where you're able to include work logs and work detail. When we include those in Excello, we're actually bringing them in as plain text. So the copy that you see in the collapsed view here is really what we show when you're generating the work logs on an invoice. And then the last piece is really that, historical, what happens to all of the old activities, the things that you've been creating in Excello up until the day where you had access to this rich text experience. And the answer is those guys will be shown as plain text. There is no way to historically make them look rich, but we do fall back gracefully If there is no rich stuff, then we go back and show you the plain stuff normally. All right, so I think that's pretty much the end of the rich text experience. Now we're going to move on to the event-based triggers. So event-based triggers are one of the other most popular things that people have been asking for. And the best way to explain what they do is with a couple of examples. But before we get into the examples, it's worth a quick refresh on what triggers are. So at Excello, one of our priorities is to really help you automate your operations in your service business. So it's about automating all of the things that need to be done that, frankly, most of them you don't want to have to do manually, and trying to remember to do them manually drives you crazy. So we want to automate them with technology so you can get back to doing the work that you love. And a big part of this automation is having the system run in the background so that while you're sleeping, Excello can be running and looking for problems and bringing them to your attention so you can do something about them so that you're not really surprised. So it's all about saying, okay, how is this tracking? Is this project running over budget? Is this task overdue? All of those sorts of behaviors we want to be able to do automatically for you. And the way that we do those is with triggers. So triggers are automated. They run always in the background. You don't have to remember to go into Excello to pull the report to find that there's a detail that's not quite right. They're rule-based, so you're able to identify that a trigger should be satisfied, that the rules are all satisfied, such as a project that's overdue and over budget, but it was created after this date and it's managed by this person. So you can set those sets of rules up, and then you tell Excello to take action once those rules are satisfied. So then you can do things like send emails, create tasks, change the status of work, update custom fields, other forms of, sort of raising the alarm or taking action. Now, in the past, the types of triggers we've supported are just this concept of what we consider to be an ongoing, always running in the background type of experience. Every trigger itself is actually a combination of both the object, such as a sale, a project, a ticket, or a retainer, and then type. So a particular type of sale, a particular type of project, a particular type of ticket, a particular type of retainer. And the reason for that is because the rules and the sensitivity you have, say, for example, around service level agreements for a certain ticket type are going to be different to the service level agreements that you have for a different ticket type or a different project. Now, historically, as mentioned, we've had these ongoing triggers for a while in the product, and people really love them. It's part of that running the business while you're sleeping. And they run in the background on a scheduled basis. They get reevaluated whenever the object is changed or modified. So whenever somebody does something, creates or modifies the ticket or the sale or the project, we'll reevaluate those triggers, and we'll reevaluate the rules, I should say. But they can also be scheduled to only run at certain times. So, we've found it's valuable to have one that reminds the sales team, for example, if they haven't gotten in touch with a prospective client, and we don't want to do those reminders until 9 a.m. Business time, so they don't wake up in the morning and find that there's 30 emails and they're like, oh, I'm still like an hour and a half or 2 hours from the office, and then they sort of forget about them. So you can schedule when that they run. They're ideal for background checks. So they're often time-based background checks as well. So such as a sale hasn't had an activity in more than 7 days, bang, send a reminder to the salesperson and CC their manager. Be like, hey, what's going on? These guys haven't been touched. If the ticket is past service level agreement or SLA time period, you can escalate it, change the priority, send an email out to the high priority team. Or you could also create reminder tasks, for example, such as a client check-in if no one's talked to that client in 6 weeks, to pick an arbitrary number. Now, the problem with these rule-based background checks is they weren't able to handle the scenario of, hey, somebody just sent us an email. So an example would be, you've got a support ticket that's currently in a status called waiting for client because you sent the client an email and said, hey, I need some help, or I need some extra information before I can work on this. When that client replies, you really want Excello to be automatically able to change the status of that particular ticket across to be now active and running. And the problem is The previous ongoing scenarios were more about identifying if things haven't happened because they're running in the background and doing time-based checks. Whereas with these event-based triggers, where an email comes in, for example, you want to be able to fire it there and then around what's happened. So what we're launching today is the new event-based triggers that allow you to run an event whenever you create an activity. They allow you to specify the owner, such as anybody or the contact, client contact or a staff member. They allow you to set some criteria or some rules around the subject and the body of the activity itself. So if the subject contains urgent, then you can take action in a certain way, but if it doesn't, then don't worry about it. You can also look at it based on the amount of time that's been logged. So somebody's logging, say, as a project, they've logged more than 8 hours in one timesheet entry or one activity. You're like, oh, I need to have a closer look at that. And also medium. So you can say, I only want this to run for emails, or I only want this to run for meetings. It's really ideal for those interactive event-based checks, such as I mentioned, waiting for a client to reply to a ticket to reopen it. Or those kinds of alerts that you'd want to have when the project is past 80% of budget and the user logs more than 8 hours. So let's jump in and look at this as a demo together. So as mentioned, this is all happening based on the project or the object as well as the type. So here in the configuration area, I'm in the progressions area and I'm modifying this default project type. And I can see that I've got a trigger here, and this is one that I set up earlier, so I'll just sort of step you through it. It's an event-based trigger, so one of the things that we've changed now is how we show the icons and the details of what's going on. So we've got event versus ongoing represented. And in this example, I'm going to go through and look at this trigger, which is one where I'm looking at, I'm wanting to fire this trigger when somebody logs more than 8 hours and the project's at more than 80% of budget. So I come in here, this is one I've already set up earlier, so we lock it in, it's an event type. And I can see that this is only relevant when the activity was created by a staff member where they had more than 8 hours logged. And I don't care what the subject of the body is, all I really care is that they've had more than 8 hours logged. Now, I can also say that I want this trigger to run anytime, but potentially I could be just wanting to do, not weekends. Some of our clients will probably use this to be able to, have escalation or notification criteria, or even change the billable rate on a project based on weekend work for a sort of overtime in a fashion. And then we have down here in the frequency area, the ability to say, hey, do I run this just once for a project, such as only allow this to happen a single time for a particular project, or run it more than once. And in this case, I care about it more than once. I care about every time somebody logs more than 8 hours, not just the first time somebody logs 8 hours. So after I've set my baseline, then I can set my rules. So my rules are basically, we've got all these different types of rules here. And I can say, okay, where the rule is that the budget used is greater than 80%. And I've already specified on the previous screen that my criteria for even being considered is that the activity has more than 8 hours. And so if that's the case, then what I want to do is send a notification out. And that notification says, hey, big activity logs. Hey there, a user recently logged a large activity on this project, more than 8 hours. You want to check since this guy's already over 80% of budget usage. So, and you've got, usual merge fields and all that other magic there for these kinds of templated things. Maybe you don't want to send an email. Maybe you're like, you know what, man, I've already got enough emails. I've had enough. But what I might want to do instead is actually have a different action, such as change a custom field or change a priority or change the status of the project. So now it moves into a status of, warning. So then you can have your list of all projects and be identifying your warning guides. So that's an example of a project ticket. You could do it on anything, but that's just an example of the over budget experience. The one that I think 100% of our users will be doing with this in fairly short order is the classic, hey, this project is waiting for the client to come back to us and now they've replied. So I'm going to go in here to my default guy, and here we have client reply on waiting. So I come in here and I can see that this is an event-based trigger. It only happens when the contact sends an email. We don't care what the subject or body is in this case, so it's any value, but if you did want to, you could be quite specific. So you could have a scenario where you say, if you want us to reopen this, please reply with the word reopen or something like that in the body. And then you could say, okay, the body contains the word reopen. and that's how you can constrain that if you wish to. In this case, I've chosen that I want it only for email activities, but there are other types potentially I could have as well. I don't care about time logs because actually in this case, contacts don't log time. And I could want this to happen any time of the day or night. So in this case, the ticket lives here. My rules are that the ticket has to be in a waiting status for this guy to fire. And then my action is I want to reopen the actual issue, change the status. And I could add to that with an email that goes out to somebody that says, hey, this got reopened. Although probably they're getting the reply from the client, so let's not overload them. But you may want to have another action such as changing the status. So you're able to do those things. And in the future, not too far away, we'll also enable those of you who are a bit more tech savvy to be able to do things like create webhooks. So you can have these sorts of events then fire in other ways that draw your attention. All right, so that's the new upgraded trigger functionality there. At the same time as doing this, we've introduced a couple of other features and improvements. So one of the ones that we have had a few little issues with is where some clients have gone through and created a trigger that, while technically valid, is probably not what they wanted and ended up causing a bit of grief because they've tried to change the status of every one of the 5,000 issues that they already have in Excello, when really they probably wanted to filter it so they only changed the status of issues that were created, after today's date, for example. And then they find themselves with a big pile going on. And the implication as well for our other users is that our queuing infrastructure is cloud-based, which means it's shared from a technology point of view. And while it automatically scales up and scales down, there is a bit of lag time in that scaling process. It takes time to automatically boot up machines in the cloud, bring them to life, and get them working on production loads. And so we've introduced with this upgrade a new feature of a backlog queue. So one client going a bit crazy and doing something a bit naughty doesn't affect the other mainstream folks who want to be able to see these tickets reopen almost instantaneously after a client replies. The other thing that's really relevant with this change, before when there were these ongoing background checks, it was very difficult to get yourself in a situation where you were causing a loop to occur. Whereas with this upgrade, it's actually quite plausible and quite easy to see scenarios where a loop could occur. So if you create a trigger, which is an email-based trigger from a staff member or potentially anybody, you could have a situation where changing the status of a ticket creates an activity that then fires the activity creation event, which then changes the status. That changing of the status could then result in an activity being created, letting somebody know that it's now moved back to reopen, which could fire the activity again, and so on and so forth. And so we've built in some safeties as well, that when we think we've detected one of those loops, it's based on how frequently a particular trigger is running on a particular object in a particular time period. Then we'll actually send the user an email and go, hey, we think you've created a loop. We've actually turned this trigger off. See how we got the on-offs here. We've turned this trigger off to protect yourself and us, because you don't want to embarrassingly explain to your client why you just sent them 15,000 emails. And you might want to review this and have another look. And it's tricky because it's not really something that you can be sure of checking for in a pathway just inside a single trigger. It's really the interplay of a complex, powerful system that can cause this to occur. So we've got this safeties now running on a general basis.